Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Be Open and Authentic with Rohit. Today we have Michael Feinstein with us on the show once again. So which means it's another incredible opportunity to learn more about startup ecosystem and technology and so many more things. So, but for today, I specifically want to focus on the stress and burnout aspect of this wonderful ecosystem, right? Which many founders and many people in the technology go through. And it's mostly due to the incredible demanding work nature that exists in startups and in some of the technology jobs. So today we will talk to Mike about how we can handle those better and just how Mike has handled in the past, because Mike has been in those scenarios multiple times. So it's an incredible opportunity to learn from those experiences and see what are the other things that we can ingrain in our day-to-day basis so that we can better handle these scenarios and never and if we can proactively avoid those scenarios as well. So firstly, thank you, Mike, once again.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And just one curious question, Mike, before we get started into it, right? Mm-hmm. So what keeps you going? And what is and how can you maintain that level of energy throughout the day? But one reason I ask is we met before like maybe 3-4 weeks, and we were in a room, and you had most energy than many other younger folks. Not trying to be not trying to have a age discrimination here, but just trying to answer like just what is that it keeps you going. And even now it is like 8 p.m. for you. So which also means it's too late to talk to me on the show normally, but like what is that keeps you going is what I want to understand.
Yeah, well, I'm lucky. Good genes, good health certainly is a good start to it. I think,
Yep.
My father worked until he just couldn't really work anymore. My mom still has plenty of energy. They both, my dad lived to be quite old. My mom's quite old, with a lot of energy. And so I think I'm lucky to have those genes, and I've been lucky that I'm, reasonably healthy. But I think, that's one aspect. I think there's a mental aspect to kind of carrying on as well and keeping it going. And for me, I just get a lot of energy from the startup ecosystem. I love talking to founders. I love, kind of hearing new ideas. It challenges me. I mean, I always think about a business when I hear about it from the founder and ask questions and try to learn more about what they're doing and understand the market. And so there's 100 things to learn from all these engagements, and that's very energizing to me.
Sure.
And so I think it just kind of feeds on itself, and that's why it kind of keeps me going. I mean, I can get tired. I do need breaks,
Sure.
but I think, there's a lot that really energizes me. And, I think overall I kind of get more out of it than I end up putting into it. So that works well.
Okay, that's great. Firstly, I think your curious nature and willingness to learn more and more, I think is probably the key. And I think to your point, right, still being humble, with a lot of experience. Again, you kind of saying that you still learn from engaging with startups more and more, even though they're in the early stage. Your interest or your mindset to learn from those engagements as well is very incredible. Thanks for that. That's something that I'll keep with me for a long time, or at least I'll try to.
Well,
Cool.
I really feel like that is like one of the keys to life, is kind of to always be curious about what's going on. I mean, no matter how much experience I have or all the different things I've done, other people have their own experiences. They've come from different places. They're working in different kinds of businesses. They have different kind of training, different opinions. So there's almost always something new to learn from just about anybody that you come across. And so if you are a little bit curious and can engage in the conversation and find these opportunities, and you can expand your own horizons and learn it. As I said, that's what really energizes me.
That's very cool. Being open to learn is the key, and having that going with that mindset for any conversation, I think is incredibly useful as well. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Cool. Yeah, and to get into today's topic, right? In the previous episode we spoke a little bit about burnouts and where you faced, in a few of your experiences. But can you provide a couple of examples in terms of where you faced those burnouts? Maybe if you can give a little more context into it, so that we can dive deep into those.
Yeah, well, I was kind of lucky in that right out of college, I really kind of dove into a startup, and it was an all-consuming situation. We were writing video games in the early 80s for Atari. We were competing against internal Atari teams on some of the same projects sometimes. And we were really pushing to get as much done as fast as we can. I think I probably really literally averaged over 80 hours a week for my first year out of college of work.
Wow.
And, you know, there were definitely weeks where I really worked over 100 hours. And that's, you can say that, but if you really start to do the math about how many hours that is every day, it was a lot. And
It's a lot.
I had all my energy I have now, plus I was a lot younger, so I had a little more energy. And I was motivated and excited by the opportunity. And, I didn't quite work that hard the second year, but I was still working pretty darn hard. And, I took on management role and responsibility role as I grew over the first couple of years of the job. And at some point, I just hit the wall. The company had some ups and downs, and I felt a lot of responsibility for the people that were working for me. And I really, as far as I know, I had like a nervous breakdown, to be honest with you. Not really diagnosed, but I just all of a sudden just like hit the wall. It's like, I got to get out of here. Company was based in Boston. I took a plane to California. I rented a car. I just like drove up the coast from San Francisco to Oregon by myself. I was smoking cigarettes, which I'd never done in my life. This is not a healthy thing to have done. And I just needed that break. And I can't even say what was really going on for sure.
Yep.
But I did that for like a week and a half, and spent almost all this time by myself, totally by myself. When I came back to work, and I was pretty sure that I was going to come back, but there was a chance I could have said, nope, I'm done with that place. I came back to work and I just realized, like, I can't push myself that hard, right? It's just obviously not healthy, not physically healthy, not mentally healthy. That has to change. And I think sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to realize that you need to do something different, right? And so, to a certain extent, I was lucky that happened early in my career. I was probably 24 years old.
Wow.
And, it's not good that I got to that point, but it is good that I was able to realize, like, I need to do something different. So I really just decided, like, working hard is hard enough, right? I don't need to go overboard. I have to be able to draw some boundaries from a time perspective and also from like a mental perspective, right? It's important to be able to kind of draw a line in your brain between, when you're, what you're doing at work and what you're doing outside work. I'm not talking about the show Severance, although that was a great show, but I'm talking about being able to put it aside. And, sometimes you can't put it aside totally, but to really kind of take the stress out of it. And it's interesting. I know I talked a bit about time management. I think we'll talk more about it today, but it was right around that time that this same company kind of brought in this time management person that taught us a lot of the skills that I still use today for time management. And that was one of the things that helped me. And we will talk more about it, but I think the real key is discipline. And the discipline you have to build up discipline like a little bit at a time. And, that's really what I did there is I just, maybe because I had such a harsh experience, it was easy for me to say, there's just no way I'm doing that again. I can't work that hard. I can't let this get to me. And so when it did start getting to me and I did feel the pressure, I could just draw on, that horrible week and a half I had in California by myself and say, I'm not going there again. And so I just
Yeah.
have to go home, take a break, hang out with my friends, watch a movie, whatever I'm doing to really separate. And I think I just got better and better at doing that over time.
Gotcha. So it's essentially finding a way to draw those lines, be it maybe with the work mentally, or maybe I mean physically, or even in
Hmm.
terms of the time commitment to it, right? And
Yeah.
particularly, one aspect that I want to talk more about is being, you felt that responsibility, that you're responsible for other people as well, and particularly for founders. I think that is one thing that stresses them a lot, because if you have like 5 or 6 people in a team, for early stage startups, and if things aren't going well, it's tough. It's a tough call. They feel all the responsibility, because in the early stage many people join with passion, even though if they don't have money, they really go above and beyond to be in that startup. So which also means that the responsibility of a founder is incredibly high, right? So how would you advise founders in this scenario, because it's really challenging to draw those boundaries, right? Because I mean, even from time management, because at some point you'll be like, hey, if they're working like 20, I may have to work like full 24 hours, because I feel more responsible now. Like, in the sense, like, how do you what do you advise for founders in on this?
Yeah, and it's a great question and a difficult answer because I think when you're in a startup, there's, in some sense, infinite work to do. The work is
Yep.
never done. You're never at the end. There's always more
Yep.
more code to write, more features to add, more customers to call. There's
Yeah.
always more stuff because you're short
Exactly.
on resources and the opportunity's big.
Yep.
So at some point, it comes down to kind of making a deal with yourself about what you're going to try to do, setting aggressive but makeable goals. And the goal isn't more, more, more. Like that just can't be the goal. One of the things that's ironic about startups is people approach them like they're a sprint. Like I'm going as fast as I can,
Hmm.
right? But they're really more like a marathon. Like successful
Yep.
startups last years before you
Yep.
get to the outcome. You can't sprint for years, right? There's a big
Yep.
difference in pace. Even the best marathoners are slow for the 400-meter run that the
Yeah.
sprinter's doing, right? So,
True.
you just so you have to, and so I think it really comes from planning in the end. And I think planning and organization is what helped me develop these skills of compartmentalizing the work. So
Hmm.
I would help lead the company on a
Yep.
pretty aggressive plan of what features we're going to try to do, when we're going to try to get them done. And, it was aggressive, but still makeable.
Yep.
And, if we could achieve that, we're satisfied. And if we're on track for that, and I think we talked about this in the last episode, how, the best engineering lead that I worked with was really good at breaking
Yep.
down these tasks so that if you got this done today, you're on track to hit the big goal. And
Yep.
so if you can just keep like, it's like, stacking bricks to build a wall, right? If you can keep
Yep.
stacking those bricks, one good day of work, another good day of work, another good day of work, where you've laid out the plan that those good days add up to getting the job done on the time you said, then you can be satisfied with that. And if you're on, and to me, I get this mental peace from like, hey, I had the 5 things on my list that I was going to do today, and I checked all those 5 boxes. I got them all done. So even
Yep.
though there's 100 things on my list, I only had 5, let's say, that I was trying to do today, plus deal with today's fires.
Yep.
um, the fact that I got those 5 done lets me relax, even though there's another 95 waiting, and I'm going to chip off 5 more tomorrow, let's say. So
Yep.
I think you can't get overwhelmed by the totality of the task. You have to trust that you've broken the task down into, um, you know, kind of aggressive but achievable chunks that help you hit the overall goal. And
Yeah.
this takes discipline. I think it's hard for people to plan if you're not in the habit of planning. It's easy for
Yeah.
people to talk themselves into, well, I'll just make it up tomorrow. I didn't quite get it all done today. I'll make it up tomorrow. And sometimes, I had to work extra to get that stuff done. So it's not like
Yeah.
this was a 40-hour a week task. I mean, I definitely work long hours, but I think there's a calm that comes with checking that last box off, even if I'm doing it at 9 o'clock at night, you know, and then now I'm done for the day. So at least I have a couple hours when
Yeah.
I can actually decompress, disconnect from work,
Yeah.
focus on something else. I mean, hopefully I can do it before 9 o'clock, but let's just say it takes a little
Yeah.
extra time.
Yeah.
You still get that break. Whereas if you just feel like I got to keep going on this list of 100 things till it's done, you can work around the clock day after day after day. And
Yeah.
sometimes you feel like you're not getting there because you can't see how it all stacks up to getting the job done in total.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So discipline, organizing the work a little better. And I think the real key is breaking down the work into smaller chunks and making incremental progress day by day. So, I mean, I can totally see why it is important or how it can benefit. But I think to your point, the emphasis here is sometimes even though if you don't or can't deliver all of this work, even incremental, and going back to the drawing board and reorganizing the work is the key, because I think that's something that we spoke in the last episode as well, that because if you can't deliver the full-blown product by the time, maybe you can still have a compressed version of it, which is still good enough to push. Because even if you decide that, hey, I'm gonna spend like 10 more hours or 20 more hours per week to make sure that I deliver everything, that might not work well, because again it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? So
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. So
I mean,
breaking
one of
down
the
the
real
task.
keys, if I can just like jump in, one of the real
Sure.
keys though is like the advanced warning system that you're going off track, right? So if you have things well planned, and then
Hmm.
all of a sudden, oh, I was supposed to get this done today and I didn't get it done, and I'm not really that close. Like this isn't just an extra hour for me to get this done,
Yeah.
because if it's just an extra hour, I'm just going to do the extra hour and I'll get it done.
Yeah.
But this is like, oh, this task is actually a lot bigger than I thought. And now that I'm into it, I'm realizing like it's more complicated. That's
Yeah.
the time to update your plan, right?
Yeah.
Rather, yeah, maybe you'll work a couple extra hours and make a little bit more of a dent in it. But, at some point you have to say, at some point early on, you have to say, something's different here. I'm going to have to really replan, work with my team, work with my manager. Maybe we can shift other tasks around. Maybe we can talk to product management and say, is there a couple features we can drop to have a little more bandwidth? Because this
Yeah.
feature might be really important. It just turned out to be a lot more complex than we thought. So let's
Yeah.
replan the work right now so we can
Yeah.
get it done in the marathon fashion, not with a series of overnight sprints,
Yeah.
um, and reallocate the work, reprioritize, drop features, whatever you have to do. Add some resource. If you're in a bigger company, you might have the
Yeah.
ability to add some resource to help get something done.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
but do all that so that you can kind of maintain the aggressive but realistic pace and still get it done. But if you don't have that early warning system, which really comes from having the good plan, if you don't have that
Yeah.
early warning system, you're going to fool yourself about how much, like, how far behind you really are. I've worked on other projects, we've been talking about the good ones, but I've worked on other projects where, the engineering team says, we're on track, we're on track, we're on track. And then 2 days before the end, oh, we're a month behind. It's like, what?
Yeah.
How does that happen? That was a horrible couple of days. But obviously they were behind for a long time, but they fooled themselves. They didn't have a good mechanism for tracking. They didn't have a detailed enough plan. They kept thinking
Yeah.
they could just make it up with a little extra work. And then finally, they're at the very end and there's just no possibility of getting it done. And they just
Yeah.
capitulate and say, oh, we're really behind. I mean, it's so much. I mean,
Yeah.
if they had a good plan and a well-run project, they probably would have known months before. Months, and I
True.
mean, if you're behind by that much,
Yeah.
you could start to detect it months and months in advance.
Agreed. So this, I think this is very important, right? Having advanced warning system and proactively making sure that you're not deviating from the plan. And then another important thing here is it's not just the job of a founder. I think every hire in the team or every person in this domain have to have the similar mindset or the similar approach to the
Hmm.
job, right? Because if even one person is messing up or if even one person is not following the process, so it incredibly delays the product or the deliverable, which again adds stress to other teams as well, other team members. So I think finding a way to ingrain this culture into the team and then being on top of things is very, very key here. Right, cool. Thanks for sharing this, Mike. You spoke a little bit about compartmentalizing the work. So which is, I mean, which can we can see it in multiple ways, particularly drawing the line from personal to professional work, or maybe even in the company itself, maybe product versus funding. So I think we need those mini compartments for ourselves. So, but just curious to know your thoughts more into this aspect.
Yeah, so I think there's multiple ways of compartmentalizing the work. I mean, when you're a CEO, you have to worry about all different aspects of the company: product
Yeah,
development, sales and marketing, finance, fundraising, hiring,
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
And so if one thing is going a bit off track, you can't let it derail the rest of the things you're working on. You have to focus on the thing that's a bit off track, but doesn't mean that you kind of ignore everything else because that all needs some level of attention. So I think being able to compartmentalize, to me, it just comes from organization. I mean, some of it is just practice and discipline, right? So it's
yeah,
remaining objective about the situation, right? So I think that's one of the biggest challenges as a founder is, you're so passionate about the opportunity that you can lose your objectivity. And when you lose
yeah,
your objectivity, you're leading with emotions rather than facts and intelligence. And so
mm,
that's when you can have these wild swings and everything becomes focused on the one thing that maybe is struggling to the depth, and that kind of hurts everything else, and you end up in a downward spiral.
yeah,
So, maybe I'm trying to make it sound easy about this compartmentalization, but I think it's something that you have to work on and build
yeah.
up to. It's not
True.
something that I did naturally myself either. It just, it's like a practice that I built and developed, just like any other skill, playing a sport or anything else. You try it, you don't always succeed, you make mistakes, you fail,
Yeah,
you realize, oh, I could do a better job with that. You come up with, I would often come up with my own approaches of how to do various aspects of this organization and management. I learned from others, obviously,
yeah.
and you just try to get a little bit better every time. One of the
True.
things that was really interesting for me is, in my career, I was an entrepreneur, venture capitalist, back to entrepreneur.
Mm,
And I think I was a much better, more balanced leader as an entrepreneur after I spent time as a VC. Because
mm,
when you're a VC, you certainly are interested in the companies, you're excited about the companies, you're telling your partners how great these companies are going to be. But you also have to have some level of distance. I mean, you don't really work there, you're not there every day. And at some point, you have to say, like, is this going well? Is the company going well? Is the CEO the right person to be running the company? Have the market conditions changed? The financing conditions changed? There's all kinds of factors. And you have to remain objective about the company while you still remain committed and passionate about the company. And that's a complex situation. And so when I, finished up my time as a VC and decided I want to go back and be an entrepreneur again, I think I was much better because that
mm.
objectivity that I developed as a VC helped me. And
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think I was thinking about the companies in exactly the same way that a VC would, but I had that thinking available. So yeah, I was
Yeah.
passionate about the companies and, all that, worked hard, built the teams, executed,
Yeah.
but I could also remain objective. And I think that helped me be a much better leader.
Great. I think this is something that most startups, or at least most founders I know, may not have consciously thought about it, right? Because it's so easy to treat that company as a baby and be emotionally attached to it. But again, if you do it, if something derails, then you're being too emotional than being data driven or being objective about it.
Hmm.
Because at times you may have to let go of some things, but if you're emotionally attached to it, you may not make the right judgment for it, right? So I think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. Objectivity is another thing that we may have to consciously practice, as well as the compartmentalizing, right? Because if we take like 4 segments, maybe finance, hiring, product, or sales, if one thing is messed up, we cannot let that flow into the other 3 aspects, because that incredibly derails the company. So
Exactly.
yeah, so you're right in terms of it's not like white or black. It takes time. There is no certain formula for it, right? Hey, I'm gonna
It's a
consciously
skill.
focus on this aspect. It's a skill that you need to develop over time, and it's not something that you can practice maybe practice every day, but you don't consciously do it, because you have to go through that experience and make sure that you are following it consciously on a daily or weekly basis, for sure. And it even gets and Mike, it even gets tougher to draw the boundaries between personal and professional life, right? But even particularly for founders,
Hmm.
because there is a very thin line now, because it's your company and you're responsible. I think even so, I want to understand what are the things that you have done to draw the line between personal and professional, or compartmentalizing your personal and professional life.
Yeah, and it's very challenging. And I think, I always viewed startups not as a personal commitment, but as a family commitment. Your whole family has to be on board with the fact that you're going to be sacrificing some time with them. It's not a 40-hour
Yeah.
a week job. It's not a 50-hour a week job. Hopefully, it's not a
Yep.
100-hour a week job because that's not
Yeah.
sustainable. But, it probably is a
Yeah.
60-hour a week job. And so that is real time that is away from your family, and your family's got to buy into that. So I think if you
Mm.
don't have that buy-in from your family, your spouse, your partner, whatever, um, there's going to be tension, right? Because they're going to keep
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, like come home earlier, come home for dinner, do all this." So
Yeah.
I think it starts with just having that general understanding. Like I'm working in a startup. It's going to be more time than a typical job, and getting that acceptance. I'm so lucky to have had a very wonderful wife who is very supportive, and
Cool.
my kids. Obviously, it's hard for little kids to understand, but luckily I was able to, you know, carve out the time so that I could spend time with my kids and probably
Yep.
sacrifice some of my own hobbies and interests because I put my kids, for example, ahead of that. So I
Yeah.
think it starts with that. I think, you know, to me, all these things feed on each other. So if you're objective about the company and so you realize like what's important and what's not, and you have a well-planned work day, so you've got a good sense of what constitutes a successful day. I got the things
Yep.
done I needed to get done. Then it does free you to then say, okay, I got
Yeah.
that stuff done. I can now spend time with my family. And I can now go home and not carry the work home with me, and
Yeah.
try not to. Certainly, it's not always successful,
Yep.
but
Yep.
try not to do that. And really, I mean, I would make just like I would make commitments to myself on the work side, like I've got to get this project done or this meeting or whatever. I would make the same commitments at home, like
Mm.
certain nights I'm eating dinner at home tonight with my kids. Like I don't care if I'm working after dinner, and I often did that. I would often leave the
Yep.
office at a reasonable time to have dinner with my kids and my wife and spend a little time with them, and then I'd work in the evening, right? So, there was some benefits to that, and that I got a little bit of a break during the day. Definitely got the important time with my family and my children, particularly when they were young, and
Yeah.
could help keep it in balance. So it's really just kind of having that disciplined schedule where you're putting all of your priorities into your day, not just your work priorities, right? So you kind of
Yeah.
need like an integrated set of priorities. So is it important that you have dinner with your kids a certain number of nights a week? Then you've got to make
Yeah.
that commitment. And that commitment to them is the same as the commitment to your work. If you just put
Mm.
work first and everything else second, then it's going to
Yeah.
be much harder to keep that balance.
Agree. Um, the integrated approach is the key, and oftentimes we may not plan for or track these commitments to the family because it's so easy to get lost in work and with all those responsibilities, right? Which is another challenging part, and it's also not great because we deserve or they deserve to spend time, as a family, right? It's ultimately it's the highest priority, but sometimes it's not always the case, and it's understandable at times, but that can probably work in sprints, not as a marathon. If it has to be a marathon, then family has to get a buy-in that you are going to work for longer hours, and on top of it, it's our responsibility to not take the work home, because which you made a very good point here in terms of wrapping the day up properly, because when you have so many pending tasks or when you don't plan properly, which means that you're not completing the day well, which means that you have that in your mind that, hey, this hasn't been a great day and there is so much to get done. I think that is when we carry all the pressure to home and to the next day as well, which adds up and eventually leads to the burnout. So I can really see why has to be the integrated approach, and even prioritizing both things the same way. It's never the work or the family, right? I mean, depending on, at times we may have to prioritize one or the other, but for the most part, we have to give equal weightage to it and make sure that we are following those on day-to-day basis. I think it's also time we need to create those sprint boards or those goals that, hey, on the personal side as well, because it's mostly since we have those deadlines which we have, which keeps us thinking, about those timelines that we need to deliver. But I think if we keep tracking those our family timelines or commitment, I think it will probably be a better
I think that's right.
world for all of us.
The kinds of things that I did was I would just make those commitments to my family, like dinner at home, certain number of nights a week, and I would tell them these are the nights I'm going to do it, and I did it, and like I would put the work aside and I'd go have that dinner, or we would say, hey, we're going to go do this activity over the weekend, or this particular weeknight we're doing something, and I just prioritize that at the same level as any work task. It's like I have to do this. This
Yeah,
is, for this moment, it's my number one priority. And so you end up
agree.
with, as like I said, this integrated list of priorities, not work priorities over here, personal priorities over there, but as I'm planning out my day and my week, I had integrated priorities. And, to a certain extent,
Yeah,
there were sacrifices. Obviously, there's some things, maybe I had some work conferences that were at the same time as something that my kids wanted me to go to. And I had to choose one. And oftentimes that might be that conference. So it's not like
yeah,
I'm not saying you can do everything. I gave up
sure.
maybe a lot of personal hobbies. I don't
Yep,
golf, I don't play tennis, stuff like that, because I just didn't have time to develop those hobbies. I I might have
yep,
enjoyed doing that. But like that's something that I sacrificed because you
yep,
can't do everything, right? Something's got to give.
yep,
But it's important
yep,
that you are conscious about making those priority decisions and you stick to them
exactly.
and kind of honor those commitments to to your family particularly, but also to the company. The company, you've got
Exactly.
commitments to the employees, to the investors. It's not the same as your family, but it's, in the end, like why
Yep,
was I was working? I was working because I loved it, but also there was economic opportunity that helps my
yep,
family. So I mean, it is all kind of integrated together, and
yep.
everyone's got to kind of buy into that.
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense. Just go with that integrated approach and set equal commitments and be realistic about the sacrifice that you want to make. Because at times, if you are in the journey, you may not have the similar life as your colleagues, friends, or family, because they might not be going to the same path. So which is sometimes stressful, particularly for the family, because they want to go on those trips and they want to do all the things that others are doing. So I think having that alignment with the family and or anyone in the network, and making sure that you are realistic about those goals and the sacrifices, will actually help us over time. That makes sense. And I think here the key that we should be emphasizing is we should always come back to the planning and organizing the work. If these all are not gonna work out, if the work day isn't planned well or executed well, if there is so much pending, or if there is so much overflow on the day, that eventually impacts all of it, no matter how the level of commitment, right? So I think planning and organization is the key, and then eventually being conscious about all of the things that we spoke about is incredibly helpful. Cool. Thanks for that, Mike. So, and want to dive a little bit into the time management aspect quickly. So can you share some of the time management things that you follow or that you embed into your life on day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I think it's something that's built up over time. So like we said before about other things, it's a skill you have to develop. So I think the two most important things are, really making clear what's the most important things you have to do every day, and to really schedule those into your calendar, like block it off like it's a meeting, like it's an appointment, and, don't finish the day until those things are done. So you can't do that with 10 things. Maybe you start with one. Like this is because you have to, again, it's like a muscle. You have to develop a skill. Every day I'm going to set one thing that I commit to myself. I will absolutely get this done today. I don't care what other things happen. This thing's getting done. And then you can do it with 2 things and 3 things and 4 things. And, obviously everyone's work life is different. Some people have lots of meetings. Some people don't. But, kind of making sure you think about what's the most important thing that you have to do that day and getting that done first. Maybe not first chronologically, because maybe you've got morning meetings and you're going to work on this afternoon. That's fine. But, it's your first priority that you're going to get that most important thing. And then, as you get better at it, like I said, you can schedule in multiple of these. The other thing that I think is real important is avoiding interruptions. So we get interrupted by many things on our phones, all the notifications, emails. If you're working in an office, people coming by and bothering you, maybe your phone rings, maybe there's lots of things that can be interruptions.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to be really disciplined about that. So my technique is I turn off all notifications pretty much on my phone, almost none. And, back when I worked in an office, I don't really work in an office anymore. I work at home. If I had a door, I closed it. If someone came into my office, there's like techniques you can use to get them to go away very nicely, like stand up. Like if you're sitting at your desk and they come in, you stand up, it stops the conversation. You kind of walking towards the door to kind of escort them away. And so you just, managing those interruptions helps keep you focused and helps you get those most important tasks done. I think those are the two most important skills. Everything else just kind of builds on that, because like after that is this rigorous project planning that we talked about, and the work planning. One other thing that kind of goes hand in, it's kind of part of both of those things, is to try to minimize the number of times you physically or virtually touch something. So I try to, like some new email comes in, let's say, something that I have to deal with.
Yep.
If I can deal with it now, I do. If not, I think about when am I going to do that? Am I going to do it this afternoon? Am I going to do it tomorrow,
Yeah.
Thursday? And I've got various systems in my email where I can flag it so that I kind of put it away until then. I don't keep looking at
Mm.
it, look at it later this afternoon. Oh yeah, I got to work on that. I got to work on that. It's
Yeah.
gone until it's time to work on it. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, keep that it's really about focus, I guess, in the end. Like if you can really
Yeah.
singularly focus on the task at hand, you could probably get it done more efficiently.
Agreed. I totally agree with all of it because I mean this is one challenge that I normally face as well. Just too many interruptions, too many maybe sometimes too many emails to respond, or it can be some other things, or maybe too many meetings to attend. But finding a way to minimize the interruptions and being able to singularly focus on the project, I think that is the key to get all those tasks done. Because if you are doing half-assed work in one or the other, things just overflow, and it's not a good habit as well. So
Yeah, so like
it's also not easy.
with email
Yeah,
and things like that, or Slack messages or whatever, they're all kind of interruptions.
yeah,
What I try to do is I set aside time during the day, multiple times during the day, like a half hour block. I'm doing email during that half hour block. I'll
yeah,
look at
hmm,
emails, I'll respond quickly to some, I'll figure out when I'm going to respond to others, kind of get it organized, and then I don't look at it. Like I don't get the
yeah,
notifications, there's no dinging, there's no pop-up screens. I
yeah,
put it aside until the next block.
yeah,
And then if I have some free time, like things don't take as long as I thought, I can certainly
yeah,
do more. But if I've got this big project I've got to work on and like that's my number one priority, yeah, I've got to carve out
yeah,
some time for email because it's a real time job and stuff happens. But I
sure.
make sure I get that project stuff done and I minimize the interruptions until I get it done.
Gotcha. It's like compartmentalizing your work zone,
Yeah.
right? Finding a way to minimize those interruptions. Cool. Yeah, totally makes sense. And I think it's not easy as well. I think maybe
It takes
finding a way
practice.
to
It takes
it
practice.
really takes practice. I think I've been trying it for so long. I didn't get good at it. So I think it's probably tracking it over time and making sure that I think tracking the singular, the singular focus that you can put on a task, maybe tracking the time is very important because if I look back, right, or even in my day to day, I think that singular focus time isn't very high as it should have been because which also delayed some of the tasks and all. So I think that is a very important habit to develop. And again, coming back to your, the time about the time management, obviously prioritizing say, one or two most important tasks for the day and getting those done again are the key. So prioritizing and being very disciplined about the focus or the interruptions, I think is very, I think is the key to avoid these burnouts and stress, right? Because these are the minor things that plays a bigger role eventually.
Right.
These things add up and creates a lot of problems or stress over time. So I think being good at these minor things, I think will benefit us a lot. Cool. Thanks for sharing all of this with us, Mike. So I mean, this has been I think incredibly helpful because this is not the kind of content most people create or most people generally talk about because we have been talking about how do I fundraise or how do I get hire 10 people or how can we develop awesome product, but this is I think one of the overlooked topics, and thanks for sharing your valuable opinion on it. I think this is going to help. I mean, I'm sure this is helping me already, but I think this will help a lot of people over time. Thanks again, Mike. I know we are at time, so I just want to make sure I wrap it up. So
Thank you.
do you have any last thing to say, Mike? Or
Just one last thing that I failed to mention. So when you're trying to develop that skill, and Rohit, this might help you. At the end of every
sure.
day, think about how did the day go with respect to the time management. Like, did I get the stuff done? Did I get
Yep.
interrupted? Why? What can I do to stop that? And then also spend some time planning tomorrow. What's my day going to be like
Yeah.
tomorrow? When am I going to try to do things? You know, do I have all my
Yeah.
priorities straight? So if you spend a little bit of time,
Mm.
reviewing and then planning the next day, you'll start to incorporate more best practices and realize where you're falling down a little bit. Because like it's natural, and I have, good days and bad days too. Some days get away from me as
Yeah.
well. It isn't
Yeah.
magic, but I think if you just can focus on what happened, what can I do to keep that from happening again? It just gets a little better and a little better.
Yeah. Agreed. So I think reviewing end of the day and probably proactively planning for the next day is definitely important. I think even in the long run, I think we should develop a chart or some metric to make sure that we review on a daily or weekly basis. It doesn't have to be like a thorough, like half an hour, 1 hour job. Maybe like 5 minutes every day or maybe 10 minutes every week I think is fairly enough to make sure that we are consciously developing that skill, because it's very easy to overlook these minor things and then get ourselves burned out. So finding a mechanism to track would be helpful, I guess. I think I should give it a deeper thought and come up with something that is very sustainable
Yeah,
for myself,
I
and
think it's
hopefully I'll be
helpful.
able
I
to share
also
it
think
with
it's
others as
it's
well.
important to remember you're in charge of yourself and your own time for the most part, right? So
Yeah, you are the CEO of
you're the
yourself.
CEO of you, right? So I think
Yeah.
even though you interrupted me 10 times today, let's just say, that's my fault. It's my fault for letting it happen, for being in a situation where it can happen, for not telling you not to, whatever it is. Even though you're
Yeah.
the interrupter in my scenario here, it's still my fault because I got to get my work done, right? So
Yeah.
what can I do to put myself? Maybe I'm going to go work in a different part of the office. Maybe I'm going to go hide from you, whatever I have to do, right? But I
Yeah.
have to take the responsibility that it's up to me to keep that from happening. For example, I don't mean to say you're a horrible person to work with, just an example.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, we are mostly responsible for letting things happen, right? Because you can either avoid it or you can
You could do
stay away
something.
from it too. So, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. Cool. Thanks for sharing it, Mike. And I know we're at time. I just want to make sure we wrap it up on time as well. Cool. I mean, this has been very helpful, and I'm sure it will help many others. Mike, thank you very much for taking the time and to do a second episode with me. I know there are a few more to come. Maybe we'll talk about that. But yeah, thanks for that.
It's a
This was
pleasure.
helpful.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night. Yeah.
You
Thank
too.
you. Yeah.